2 years after burying my daughter Sarah, I finally found the strength to visit the villa I'd bought her in Malibu. Walking up the driveway, I stopped cold. The garden she'd barely planted was now bursting with roses, jasmine, and birds of paradise. The windows gleamed. Fresh paint covered the weathered shutters. Someone had been living in my dead daughter's house. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door, remembering her last words. "Dad, promise you'll take care of everything." I'd failed her then. Not anymore. The drive to Malibu that morning had taken me 3 hours from my home in Pasadena, though not because of traffic. I'd stopped twice, nearly turning back both times. The weight of returning to Sarah's villa pressed on my chest like a physical thing. My name is Bartholomew, and at 68 years old, I thought I understood grief. I'd buried my wife Margaret 10 years ago, survived 2 tours in Vietnam, and worked 35 years as an aerospace engineer, designing systems meant to keep people safe. But nothing prepares you for outliving your only child. Sarah had been everything a father could hope for, and more. After Margaret passed from cancer, Sarah became my anchor. She just finished her residency at UCLA Medical Center, specializing in pediatric surgery. I still remember the day she called me breathless, with excitement about finding the villa. "Dad, it's perfect," she'd said, her voice crackling through the phone. 3 bedrooms, Spanish architecture from the 1920s, and an acre of land just begging for gardens. The owner's an elderly woman moving to assisted living. She wants it to go to someone who'll love it. The price was steep, even with Sarah's surgeon salary. That's when I surprised her for her 30th birthday, offering to cover the down payment. The joy in her eyes when we signed those papers remains one of my most treasured memories. We spent the next month planning renovations, choosing paint colors, and discussing her dreams for the space. "I want to host fundraisers here," Sarah had explained, sketching out plans on napkins at our favorite diner. "Imagine garden parties, where donors can meet the children their money helps. We could raise enough to fund free surgeries for dozens of kids each year." She'd inherited Margaret's compassion, but combined it with a strategic mind that rivaled any engineer's. Sarah didn't just dream of helping children. She created systematic plans to make it happen. The villa wasn't just a home to her. It represented a headquarters for her mission to ensure no child went without necessary surgery due to their parents' inability to pay. I helped her move in on a brilliant Saturday in March. We'd hired movers for the furniture, but Sarah insisted on personally carrying in 3 items: Margaret's favorite painting of the California coastline, a photo of the 3 of us from her medical school graduation, and a small jasmine plant she'd been nurturing in her apartment. "Jasmine was Mom's favorite," she said, carefully placing the pot near the front entrance. "I want her to be part of this place too." Those first few weeks I visited almost daily. We'd installed a state-of-the-art security system at my insistence. Sarah had laughed, calling me overprotective, but humored me anyway. "Fine, Dad. But only if you promise not to check the cameras every 5 minutes to make sure I'm eating properly." She'd teased, programming the system with passwords only we knew. The security package included motion sensors, 8 cameras covering every angle of the property, and cloud storage for all recordings. The installation tech had praised our choice, saying it was the same system used by celebrity homes throughout Malibu. Sarah had rolled her eyes at that, more interested in the pediatric journals she was reviewing than celebrity safety standards. I was organizing photos in my study when I found them scattered across my desk. Pictures from Sarah's housewarming party, her first charity planning meeting, and candid shots of her planting that tiny garden. My hand paused on one particular photo. Sarah stood between me and Harold, my younger brother. Something about Harold's expression in that photo bothered me now, though I hadn't noticed it then. While Sarah and I smiled at the camera, Harold stared at the villa behind us with an intensity that seemed almost covetous. Pushing aside the photos, I noticed my desk drawer was slightly open. Strange, since I distinctly remembered locking it after paying bills last week. Inside, my files appeared untouched, but something felt off. I kept all important documents there, including papers from Sarah's estate that I hadn't been able to face. As I rifled through them, Searching for what might be out of place, a business card fell out. Marcus Stone, private investigator, former FBI. I didn't remember keeping this card, though the name seemed vaguely familiar. That's when I found it tucked between old tax returns. An envelope addressed to me in official letterhead from Sarah's attorney, dated 1 week before her death. My blood ran cold as I read. Dear Mr. Bartholomew, as per your daughter, Sarah's request, I am forwarding the updated last will and testament for your review. As the named executor, your signature is required on the attached documents. Sarah has made several significant changes regarding the distribution of her assets, particularly concerning the Malibu property. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience to finalize these matters. I'd never seen this letter before. During those horrible weeks after Sarah's death, Harold had volunteered to handle my mail and daily affairs while I struggled to function. He'd brought me bills to sign filtered-out junk mail and generally acted like the supportive brother he'd always been. Or so I'd thought. My hands shook as I reached for my phone. The attorney's office confirmed what I feared. They'd sent the letter, but never received a response. After Sarah's death, with no updated will on file, her assets had fallen into legal limbo. The secretary mentioned that a man claiming to be my representative had called several times insisting the family needed time to grieve before handling estate matters. The truth hit me like a physical blow. Harold had intercepted the letter. My own brother had hidden critical information about my daughter's final wishes. But why? What could have been in that updated will that Harold didn't want me to see? I thought back to that photo, to Harold's expression as he gazed at Sarah's villa. The same brother who'd struggled with 2 bankruptcies, whose construction business had folded 3 years ago, who'd been borrowing money from me with increasing frequency. The brother who'd suddenly stopped asking for loans right around the time of Sarah's death. Sarah had loved her Uncle Harold despite my occasional warnings about his financial irresponsibility. She'd even hired his construction crew for some villa renovations, overpaying because family helps family dad. Now I wondered if her generosity had sparked something darker in my brother's heart. I carefully returned everything to the drawer, except the letter and the investigator's card. Tomorrow, I'd visit the villa for the first time since the funeral. But tonight, I had phone calls to make. If Harold had hidden this letter, what else had he concealed? And more importantly, why did my brilliant, cautious daughter feel the need to update her will so suddenly, just days before her death? The jasmine plant she'd placed by the front door had been a cutting from Margaret's garden, carefully propagated and nurtured. Sarah had said she wanted her mother to be part of her new beginning. Now, I wondered if my daughter had sensed an ending approaching, preparing for a possibility she didn't share with me. The security system she'd humored me by installing might have been less about my overprotectiveness and more about her own unspoken concerns. As I studied that photo one more time, I noticed something else. In the background, barely visible, Nathan stood near his father. Harold's son, my nephew, wore the same calculating expression as his father. They weren't looking at Sarah or me in the picture. Both sets of eyes were fixed on the villa itself, as if measuring its worth. The police report was 67 pages of technical jargon and cold facts. I'd read it hundreds of times in the past 2 years, searching for something everyone else had missed. Sarah died on a Tuesday afternoon in April, driving her silver BMW along Mulholland Drive to meet Harold about what she'd described as urgent family financial matters. The weather was perfect, 72 degrees with clear skies. Traffic was light. She knew those curves like a pianist knows scales. According to the investigation, she'd lost control on a routine turn, her car plowing through the guardrail and rolling 200 feet down the canyon. No skid marks, no signs of braking. The investigators concluded she'd possibly suffered a medical episode or fallen asleep at the wheel. Case closed, accidental death, deepest condolences to the family. But Sarah didn't have medical episodes. Her last physical showed perfect health. And falling asleep at 2 in the afternoon, she'd texted me that very morning, wide awake and concerned. Dad, Harold's being weird about money again. He says he found some discrepancy in your old business accounts. I'm meeting him to get to the bottom of this. Something doesn't smell right. I'd been in a board meeting when that text came through consulting for a defense contractor on guidance systems. By the time I saw it and tried calling back, she was already gone. The police found her phone in the wreckage, screen cracked, but still functional. They'd given it to me in a plastic evidence bag, along with her purse and the small medical bag she always carried. For 2 years, that phone sat in my desk drawer like an accusation. I'd been too destroyed to examine it properly, too guilty about missing her final text to dig deeper. But finding that hidden letter from her attorney had awakened something in me. That night, I called my neighbor Dennis Chen, a software engineer who specialized in data recovery. I need help with Sarah's phone, I told him. There might be deleted messages, anything from the days before she died. Dennis had adored Sarah. She'd removed his son's appendix in an emergency surgery, refusing payment because neighbors look after each other. He took the phone without hesitation. 3 days later, Dennis arrived at my door looking shaken. Bart, you need to see this. I recovered everything from the past month before her death. Texts, emails, even draft messages she never sent. We sat at my kitchen table as he walked me through his findings. The recovered data painted a disturbing picture. Sarah had discovered irregularities in the old aerospace consulting firm Harold and I had run together 15 years ago. After our business partnership dissolved, I'd trusted Harold to handle the final account closures, while I focused on Margaret's cancer treatment. According to Sarah's messages to her best friend, Dr. Emily Watson, she'd stumbled upon the discrepancies while helping me organize tax documents. I think Uncle Harold stole from Dad. Like a lot. Close to $400,000. The transfers happened right when Mom was dying. Dad was too grief-stricken to notice, and Harold must have counted on that. The messages grew more alarming as the days progressed. Sarah had confronted Harold privately, first giving him the chance to come clean. His response had been to deny everything, then pivot to veiled threats about how devastating this would be for the family if made public. When Sarah held firm, insisting he confess to me or face legal consequences, Harold had suggested the face-to-face meeting to work out a solution that protects everyone. But the most chilling discovery came from a draft email Sarah never sent, composed the night before her death. Dad, if something happens to me, look into Harold's finances. He's desperate and dangerous. I've documented everything in my office safe at the villa. The combination is Mom's birthday. I love you. She'd written it at 11:47 that night, but saved it to drafts instead of sending. Maybe she thought she was being paranoid. Maybe she didn't want to worry me without cause. That hesitation cost everything. Dennis had done more than recover messages. He'd also found Sarah's location data from that final day. She'd stopped at her bank before heading to meet Harold, likely securing copies of the fraudulent transfers. The bank manager later confirmed she'd requested 5 years of statements from the old business accounts. She'd been building an airtight case. There's something else, Dennis said, his voice dropping. Her car's diagnostic data was uploaded to BMW's cloud service. I have a friend who works there. Unofficially, he pulled the records from that day. The diagnostic report showed something the police investigation had missed or ignored. The brake system had registered multiple error codes in the minutes before the crash. Catastrophic hydraulic failure across all 4 wheels simultaneously. The probability of such a failure occurring naturally in a well-maintained vehicle, less than 0.01%. She didn't lose control, Dennis explained. She had no brakes. At 70 miles per hour on those curves, she never had a chance. The room spun as the implications sank in. This wasn't negligence or a tragic accident. Someone had deliberately sabotaged my daughter's car. Someone who knew she'd be driving on dangerous roads. Someone who stood to lose everything if she exposed their crimes. I thought about Harold's behavior at the funeral. How he'd wept so dramatically, clutching my shoulders, proclaiming how senseless it all was. How he'd volunteered to handle the estate paperwork to spare me additional pain. How quickly he'd suggested I take time away. Maybe travel, leave the painful memories behind for a while. We need to go to the police, Dennis urged. But I shook my head. Harold had connections throughout local law enforcement. His construction company had built the new police station. He played poker with half the detective squad. If I went to them with theories and technical data, how long before Harold heard about it? How quickly would evidence disappear? No, I decided. First, we build a case they can't ignore. Sarah was methodical. If she said she documented everything, then it's at the villa waiting for us. Dennis agreed to keep the recovered data secure. As he left, he paused at the door. Bart, if Harold did this, if he killed Sarah over money. He couldn't finish the sentence. Then he's been living with that guilt for 2 years, I said. But guilt isn't justice. Sarah deserves justice. That night, I dreamed of my daughter for the first time since her death. She stood in her villa's garden, surrounded by blooming flowers I'd never seen her plant. In the dream, she smiled and pointed to the security cameras she'd installed. I told you I think 3 moves ahead, Dad, she said. Check the cameras. I woke with absolute clarity. Tomorrow, I'd return to the villa. Harold might have thought he'd covered his tracks, but he didn't know about the security system's cloud backup. He didn't know that Sarah had insisted on the premium package with 2 years of storage. Most importantly, he didn't know that a father's love could be patient, methodical, and absolutely relentless in pursuit of truth. The morning couldn't come fast enough. I spent the remaining hours until dawn planning my approach. I'd enter the villa as a grieving father, finally ready to face his memories. If Harold had been watching the property waiting for me to return, he'd see exactly what he expected, a broken old man saying goodbye to his daughter's dream. But I was far from broken. I was an aerospace engineer who'd spent decades designing systems to find flaws others missed. My daughter had been murdered by a man I'd trusted with my life, my family, my business. Harold thought he'd committed the perfect crime, patient enough to wait for the investigation to close, careful enough to make it look accidental. He'd forgotten one crucial detail. Sarah was my daughter. She'd inherited more than her mother's compassion. She'd gotten my mind for systems, my paranoid insistence on backup plans, and my absolute inability to let go of a problem until it was solved. As sunrise approached, I made a list of what I'd need: copies of the recovered data, the attorney's letter, the diagnostic reports, and a clear head, despite the rage building in my chest. Harold had taken my daughter to hide his theft. He'd destroyed my family to protect his crimes. Whatever I found at that villa, whatever secrets Sarah had left behind, I'd use them to ensure Harold faced justice. Not the violent revenge my heart craved, but the systematic dismantling of his life that Sarah would have orchestrated. She'd been 3 moves ahead, even facing death. The least I could do was finish the game she'd started. The villa looked nothing like the construction zone I'd last seen 2 years ago. Where Sarah had struggled to coax life from the drought-hardened soil, professional landscaping now flourished. Massive bougainvillea draped the pergola in magenta cascades. Rose bushes heavy with blooms lined the upgraded stone pathways. The lawn rolled out like an emerald carpet, maintained by an expensive sprinkler system Sarah never had the chance to install. My key still worked, though the lock felt different, smoother, recently replaced. Inside, the transformation was even more dramatic. Sarah's eclectic mix of hospital benefit auction finds and flea market treasures had vanished. In their place sat furniture that screamed interior designer, a white leather sectional glass tables with chrome edges, abstract art that cost more than most people's cars. The walls, which Sarah had painted warm yellow to remind her of sunrise, were now stark gray. It looked like a magazine spread soulless and expensive. Fresh groceries filled the Sub-Zero refrigerator that had replaced Sarah's practical Kenmore. Organic vegetables, imported cheeses, $30 bottles of kombucha. Men's protein powder sat on the counter next to a $800 juicer. Someone was living well in my daughter's home. The master bedroom, where Sarah had slept, surrounded by medical journals and patient thank you cards, now housed a king-sized bed with a tufted headboard. The closet contained men's clothing tags, still attached to some items. Bruno Magli shoes, Armani suits, a Rolex, sitting casually on the dresser. Either Harold had experienced a financial miracle, or he was spending money that wasn't his. But the security system remained hidden discreetly, in what used to be Sarah's home office. They'd converted the room into a wine cellar, installing custom racks, filled with bottles I recognized from auction catalogs. Chateau Margaux, Screaming Eagle, Domaine de la Romane Conti. Tens of thousands of dollars in wine aging in my murdered daughter's workspace. Behind a particularly expensive bottle of 1947 Chateau d'Yquem, I found what I was looking for. The security panel, dusty, but functional. My fingers trembled as I entered Sarah's password, the date of Margaret's remission announcement, combined with my aerospace employee ID. The system hummed to life. "Welcome, Dr. Sarah," the automated voice announced. "You have 912 days of recorded footage." 912 days. The system had been faithfully recording since before Sarah's death, uploading everything to cloud storage she'd paid for in advance. I pulled out my laptop and began the download. 21,000 hours of footage across 8 cameras. While it transferred, I explored further. Sarah's office safe sat behind the wine racks, painted over, but not removed. The combination lock spun easily Margaret's birthday, just as Sarah's draft email had indicated. Inside, I found exactly what she'd promised. Bank statements with highlighted transfers. Photocopies of checks with forged signatures. A detailed timeline of Harold's embezzlement, annotated in Sarah's precise handwriting. She'd even included a USB drive labeled Evidence Backup and a sealed letter addressed to the district attorney. But underneath all the financial documentation, I discovered something that made my blood freeze. Sarah's journal, the one she'd kept since high school. The final entry was dated the morning of her death. "I dreamed about Mom last night. She warned me to be careful. I know that sounds crazy, but I can't shake the feeling that Harold might do something desperate. I've installed tracking apps on my phone and car, upgraded the villa's security footage to save automatically, and documented everything in triplicate. If he thinks I'll back down to protect family harmony, he doesn't know Margaret's daughter. Some things matter more than keeping peace with criminals, even if they share your blood." The download completed with a soft chime. I opened the first files dated 3 weeks after Sarah's funeral. There was Harold using a key to enter the villa. Not breaking in, not sneaking. Walking in like he owned the place carrying a suitcase. The timestamp read 10:14 in the morning. I remembered that day. I'd been sedated at home, unable to stop crying. Harold had told me he was handling family business, and not to worry. Fast-forwarding through the footage revealed the complete picture. Harold had moved in gradually, first bringing clothes, then personal items, finally furniture. By month 2, he was living there full-time. By month 6, Nathan and his wife Jessica had joined him. The happy family celebrating their good fortune in someone else's home. I found footage of them throughout the seasons. Harold hosting business meetings by the pool, telling potential investors this was his retreat property. Nathan and Jessica throwing parties where guests complimented their amazing taste in decor. They'd even hired staff, a housekeeper, a gardener, pool maintenance. All while, I sat in Pasadena paralyzed by grief, trusting my brother to handle the loose ends of Sarah's affairs. The most damning footage came from Harold's office conversations, captured by the study camera. He spoke freely on phone calls, believing himself secure. "The old man's completely broken. He won't come near this place for years, if ever. By then, the forged deed transfer will be ancient history. Who's going to question it? No, Nathan. I told you we deserve this. Sarah was going to waste it all on charity cases. At least now it's keeping family comfortable. Jessica's right. We need to upgrade the kitchen next. Maybe put in a home theater where that ridiculous medical office was." But one conversation stood out, dated just 2 months ago. Harold spoke to someone named Vincent, apparently a lawyer. "I need you to expedite the quiet title action. My brother's been showing signs of recovering from his grief. If he decides to visit the property..." Yes, I understand the risks. That's why I'm paying you triple your usual rate. Just get it done. Once the court recognizes my ownership claim, Bartholomew can't touch us. 2 years of open and notorious possession property tax payments in my name, substantial improvements. The law's on our side now. So that was his plan. Use legal loopholes to steal what murder had made available. I checked the timestamps against my own calendar. Every time Harold had visited me, expressed concern for my well-being, encouraged me to take more time. He'd been buying himself runway to solidify his theft. The security system had one more surprise. Motion sensors in the garage had captured everything from the night before Sarah died. There was Harold slipping in through the side door at 2 in the morning. He went straight to Sarah's BMW, sliding underneath with a toolbox. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but it caught enough. Brake lines don't cut themselves. Hydraulic fluid doesn't drain accidentally into carefully placed containers. 23 minutes. That's how long it took my brother to murder his niece. He even cleaned up after himself, taking the contaminated rags and empty fluid containers with him. Professional, methodical, evil. I sat in that wine cellar surrounded by evidence of their greed, watching my brother damn himself with every frame. The man who'd been my best man at my wedding, who'd held Margaret's hand during chemotherapy, who'd carried Sarah on his shoulders at her 5th birthday party, had killed her for money and property. But Harold had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed grief would keep me away forever. He'd counted on my pain being stronger than my love for justice. He'd bet everything on a broken old man staying broken. I carefully copied all the relevant footage to multiple drives. Sarah's financial evidence went into my briefcase. Her journal, that precious final connection to my daughter, I held for a long moment before adding it to the collection. She'd known the danger, but faced it anyway, trusting that truth would eventually surface. Before leaving, I walked through the house one more time. In what had been Sarah's bedroom, I found one surviving trace of her, a small framed photo tucked behind designer nonsense on a shelf. It showed her, at age 7, missing her front teeth, grinning beside the sandcastle we'd built at Zuma Beach. Harold's family had missed it in their redecorating frenzy. I pocketed it. As I locked the door behind me, I noticed the jasmine plant Sarah had placed by the entrance. Not only had it survived, it had thrived, growing up the trellis in a cascade of starred white flowers. The scent stopped me cold. Margaret had worn jasmine perfume on our first date. Sarah had planted jasmine at Margaret's grave. And now this lone survivor perfumed the air around her stolen home, as if both women were reminding me that beauty could outlast evil, that truth could bloom even in corrupted soil. I had what I needed: evidence of embezzlement, murder fraud, and 2 years of criminal trespass. Harold thought he'd won everything, but he'd simply been living on borrowed time in a house built on blood. The cameras had caught it all. Sarah's foresight had documented it all, and now I would ensure justice claimed it all. But I wouldn't rush. Harold had taught me the value of patience, of careful planning. He'd waited 2 years to steal a life's dream. I could wait a few weeks to destroy his. The difference was, when I finally moved, it would be with the law on my side, and 13 terabytes of evidence in my hands. Harold had played the long game, but he'd forgotten who taught him chess. The private investigator's office occupied the top floor of a Pasadena office building, discreet brass lettering, announcing Stone Security Consulting. Marcus Stone looked exactly like what he was, former FBI, now serving justice in the private sector. Gray temples, sharp eyes that missed nothing, handshake firm enough to convey competence without trying to prove anything. "Mr. Bartholomew," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Your message mentioned urgent family matters requiring investigation." I'd chosen Marcus, carefully researching investigators with no connections to Harold's circle. Marcus had spent 30 years with the Bureau, specializing in financial crimes and conspiracy cases. More importantly, he'd lost his own son to a drunk driver who'd tried to buy his way out of consequences. He understood that justice and law weren't always the same thing. For the next 2 hours, I laid out everything: Sarah's discovery of the embezzlement, the suspicious circumstances of her death, The intercepted legal documents, the security footage showing Harold's sabotage, and subsequent occupation of the villa. Marcus took notes in precise shorthand, occasionally asking clarifying questions. His expression never changed, but I noticed his jaw tightening as I showed him the garage footage. "Your brother planned this carefully," Marcus observed, reviewing the evidence. "But criminals always make mistakes when they think they've won. Living in the villa was his biggest error. Arrogance made him sloppy." We spent the next 3 days reviewing every frame of footage, building a comprehensive timeline. Marcus had software that enhanced video quality, revealing details I'd missed. In one frame, we could clearly see Harold placing brake fluid containers in his truck. Another showed him testing Sarah's car doors, likely checking if she'd installed any additional security devices. But the deeper we dug, the worse it got. Nathan appeared in footage from 2 weeks before Sarah's death, photographing documents in her home office while she was at work. Jessica was there too, going through Sarah's jewelry box, trying on pieces, even pocketing a pair of Margaret's pearl earrings that Sarah had treasured. "They were casing the place," Marcus explained. "This wasn't just about killing Sarah to hide the embezzlement. They'd been planning to rob her systematically. Her death just accelerated their timeline." The footage revealed a pattern of visits whenever Sarah worked late shifts at the hospital. Harold had copied her key during a family dinner, using it to grant access to Nathan and Jessica. They'd photographed financial documents, assessed valuable items, even measured rooms for furniture they planned to bring. One particularly disturbing sequence showed Nathan in Sarah's bedroom, going through her personal items, while Jessica kept watch. He'd found Sarah's diary, reading passages aloud while Jessica laughed. "Their mockery of my daughter's private thoughts, her dreams of helping children, her grief over losing Margaret, made me physically ill. She writes about saving for another year to afford the new surgical equipment," Nathan read in a mocking tone. Meanwhile, Uncle Harold says this place is worth $3 million easy. $3 million sitting empty while she plays Mother Teresa. "She should get a life," Jessica had responded. "Oh wait, that problem's about to solve itself." They'd known. Before Harold cut those brake lines, Nathan and Jessica knew what was coming. They were accomplices, not just beneficiaries. Marcus paused the footage. "This is conspiracy to commit murder. They'll all face life sentences." We discovered more evidence in their careless conversations. Harold had been in contact with a cousin who worked at the DMV, arranging to be notified if I ever requested records related to the villa. He'd paid bribes to delay probate proceedings, keeping Sarah's estate in limbo while he established residency. Every system's failure that had kept me from discovering the truth had been orchestrated. The financial trail Marcus uncovered was equally damning. Harold hadn't just stolen the $400,000 from our old business. He'd been siphoning money for years, using shell companies and false invoices. The total approached $800,000. But that wasn't enough for him. He'd also taken out life insurance policies on Sarah 2 years before her death, forging her signature on applications. The beneficiary A, trust he controlled supposedly for family estate planning. He started planning her murder the day those policies became active, Marcus concluded. The embezzlement discovery just triggered his timeline. We found footage of Harold meeting with Vincent, his corrupt lawyer, in the villa's study. They discussed strategies for claiming ownership, fabricating documentation, showing Sarah had promised the property to Harold before her death. Vincent advised patience, letting time and possession create the illusion of legitimacy. But the most heartbreaking discovery came from Sarah's own preparations. Hidden in her office, the cameras had captured her late-night work sessions. She'd been building not just a criminal case, but a comprehensive report on Harold's entire network of corruption. Construction contracts obtained through bribery, safety violations covered up with payoffs, even connections to a county assessor who'd undervalued properties Harold wanted to buy cheap. In one recording dated 3 nights before her death, Sarah spoke to herself while organizing evidence. "If something happens to me, at least this will stop him. He's hurt so many families stolen from people who trusted him. Dad doesn't know how deep this goes. I wish I could protect him from the truth about his brother, but some cancers have to be cut out completely. She'd known the danger, but proceeded anyway, driven by the same compulsion to heal that made her a brilliant surgeon. Where she saw disease, she couldn't help but try to cure it, even when the patient was family. Marcus compiled everything into a prosecutable case. Financial crimes, murder, conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse through manipulating my grief. The evidence was overwhelming, inadmissible in some cases, due to how it was obtained. But that was why Marcus had contacts in the FBI who could independently discover key evidence through proper channels. "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked after we'd assembled the full picture. I thought about Sarah, about how she'd handle this. She wouldn't want simple arrest and prosecution. That was too clean, too easy. Harold had spent 2 years living in luxury, thinking he'd won. Nathan and Jessica had thrown parties in rooms where Sarah had dreamed of healing children. They'd turned a place of hope into a monument to greed. They need to lose it all publicly, I decided. Sarah was building to something bigger than just stopping Harold. She wanted to expose the whole network. We're going to finish what she started, but we're going to do it in a way that leaves them nowhere to hide. Marcus smiled for the first time since we'd met. I have some ideas about that. Your brother likes an audience when he's playing successful businessman. Let's give him one he'll never forget. We began planning the final act. Harold had murdered my daughter to protect his secrets and steal her dreams. He'd spent 2 years believing he'd crafted the perfect crime. But perfection is an illusion, and Harold's was about to shatter into very public pieces. The security system had one more gift. In the cloud storage, I found hours of Sarah's video journals recorded in her office during those late nights when she couldn't sleep. In the final entry, she looked directly at the camera. "Dad, if you're watching this, it means I was right to be worried. I'm not scared of dying. I'm scared of Harold getting away with hurting more people. Use what I've gathered. Make it count. And remember, I love you more than all the stars you taught me to name." I watched that message 17 times, memorizing every word, every expression. My brilliant, brave daughter had faced death with the same clarity she brought to surgery. She'd cut deep to remove the cancer, trusting me to close the wound. Harold thought he'd silenced her forever. He was about to learn that some voices echo louder from the grave, especially when they speak truth to carefully documented power. Playing the broken man came naturally after 2 years of genuine grief. When I called Harold the next morning, I let my voice crack, added a tremor that wasn't entirely manufactured. "Harry," I said, using the childhood nickname I'd abandoned decades ago. "I've been thinking about Sarah's villa. Maybe it's time to let it go. The memories are just too painful." The pause on his end was brief, but telling. "Bart, are you sure? I mean, that's a big decision. Sarah loved that place." "I know." I sighed heavily. "But I can't even drive past Malibu without breaking down. Do you know any good real estate agents? Someone who could handle this discreetly? I don't want a bunch of strangers tramping through her things." "Actually," Harold replied, his voice carefully modulated, "let me look into that for you. No need to rush into anything. Why don't I come by this weekend? We can talk through your options." Perfect. He'd taken the bait exactly as Marcus predicted. We'd studied Harold's patterns from the security footage, learning his his habits. When he felt threatened, he moved fast. When he thought he was winning, he played the concerned brother. His tone now dripped with false compassion. That weekend, Harold arrived at my house with bakery cookies and rehearsed sympathy. He looked prosperous, wearing a Rolex I now knew he'd bought with stolen money, driving a new Mercedes paid for with my daughter's blood. We sat in my living room, surrounded by photos of Sarah he could barely glance at. "You know," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee, "the market's pretty soft right now. You might not get what the place is worth. Maybe you should hold on to it a bit longer." "I can't," I said, letting my shoulders slump. "The property taxes alone are killing me. And there's maintenance insurance. I'm on a fixed income now, Harry. The aerospace consulting dried up after I couldn't focus anymore. His eyes lit up with barely concealed greed. Tell you what, rather than see you take a loss with strangers, maybe I could help. Buy it from you directly. Keep it in the family. I could even maintain Sarah's garden the way she would have wanted. Sarah's garden, the one he'd ripped out and replaced with professional landscaping. The jasmine plant by the door was the only survivor of her original vision. I forced myself to nod, gratefully. That's very generous, Harry. What do you think would be fair? He named a figure so insultingly low, it took every ounce of control not to react. 800,000 for a property worth over 3 million. But I'd expected this. Marcus had predicted Harold would lowball aggressively, counting on my ignorance and emotional vulnerability. That sounds like a lot of money, I said, playing the confused old man. I don't really understand real estate. Could you handle the paperwork? I trust you, Harry. You've always looked out for me. The irony of that statement hung between us, but Harold just smiled already, calculating his profits. Of course. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers. We can make this easy for you, Bart. No realtors, no commissions, just family taking care of family. After he left, I called Marcus. He's moving exactly as you predicted. What's next? Now, we accelerate his timeline, Marcus explained. Make him think you're more desperate than you are. Meanwhile, I'll start placing the other pieces. Over the following week, I played my part flawlessly. Called Harold about imaginary financial pressures. Mentioned considering reverse mortgages. Even had Dennis, my tech-savvy neighbor, casually run into Harold at a coffee shop and mention how worried he was about my mental state. Harold responded by pushing harder. His lawyer, Vincent, prepared sales documents with increasingly predatory terms. Hidden clauses that would forfeit my rights to any personal property left in the villa. Agreements that would prevent me from ever contesting the sale. Language that would essentially rob me blind while making it legal. But while Harold focused on his paperwork, Marcus was building our trap. He'd contacted FBI colleagues who opened an independent investigation into Harold's construction business, based on anonymous tips. He'd reached out to families Harold had defrauded over the years, gathering their stories. Most importantly, he'd connected with Emily Watson, Sarah's best friend and fellow surgeon. Emily had never believed the accident story. She'd been devastated when the police closed the case, but now, with evidence in hand, she became our most powerful ally. As a respected doctor with connections throughout the medical community, she could organize something Harold would never see coming. Sarah always wanted to use the villa for charity events, Emily said during our planning session. What if we actually did that, a memorial fundraiser for her children's surgery foundation? It was perfect. Harold couldn't refuse without looking suspicious. He'd have to open his villa to Sarah's colleagues, pretending to honor the niece he'd murdered. The event would be his stage, but we'd be writing the script. I called Harold with calculated excitement. Harry, I've been thinking. Before we finalize the sale, maybe we should do something for Sarah. Emily Watson reached out about hosting a memorial fundraiser at the villa. 2 years since we lost her. It could be closure for everyone. A fundraiser. Harold's voice tightened. I don't know, Bart. The place needs work, and having all those people. Please, I said, letting desperation creep in. It's what Sarah would have wanted. One last gathering in her home. Emily's already contacted donors, printed invitations. We could raise money for the children's surgery fund she cared so much about. After that, I'll sign whatever papers you want. The hook was perfectly barbed. If he refused, it would raise questions. If he agreed, he'd have to scramble to hide evidence of his occupation. Either way, he was trapped. All right, he conceded. But let's keep it small. Just close friends and colleagues. When were you thinking? 2 weeks. I said, knowing it would send him into panic mode. Emily's already reserved the date with the hospital board members who knew Sarah. After hanging up, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. 2 weeks gave Harold enough time to clean up, but not enough to cover everything. He'd make mistakes in his haste. More importantly, he'd be so focused on the immediate threat that he wouldn't see the real danger approaching. Marcus had assembled a team of forensic accountants who were tracing every dollar Harold had stolen over the past 15 years. The FBI was building racketeering charges that would implicate Nathan Jessica Vincent and a dozen corrupt officials. Emily was ensuring that everyone who mattered in Sarah's life would attend that memorial. But I had one more card to play. In Sarah's safe, I'd found contact information for a journalist named David Park, who'd been investigating corruption in Southern California construction. Sarah had been feeding him information before her death. When I reached out, he remembered her immediately. She was brilliant, David recalled. Careful, methodical. She promised me a story that would expose systemic corruption going back decades. Then she died, and my editor killed the investigation. Said without her testimony, we had nothing solid. What if I told you we now have everything she promised, and more video evidence, financial records, even a murder confession caught on camera? David's excitement was palpable. I could have a team ready to film within days. This is Pulitzer material if it's what you're describing. The pieces were falling into place. Harold thought he was closing a real estate deal that would cap off his perfect crime. Instead, he was walking into a memorial service that would become his public destruction, filmed for posterity and broadcast to the world. I visited Sarah's grave that evening, placing fresh jasmine flowers against her headstone. "We're almost there, sweetheart," I whispered. "Your Uncle Harold is about to learn what happens when you mistake patience for weakness, silence for ignorance. You always said you thought 3 moves ahead. Turns out you taught your old man to do the same." The wind carried the scent of jasmine across the cemetery, and for a moment, I could almost hear Sarah's voice. "Make it count, Dad. Make it matter." I would. In 2 weeks, Harold's empire of lies would collapse in front of everyone who'd ever trusted him. The cameras that caught him entering the villa as a murderer would broadcast him leaving it in handcuffs. Sarah's death had been his first move. The memorial would be checkmate. The morning of the memorial arrived with coastal fog that seemed fitting for the occasion. Harold had spent 2 weeks in barely concealed panic, and it showed. The security footage I'd been monitoring remotely revealed the full scope of his desperation. Professional movers hauling out furniture at midnight. Nathan and Jessica scrubbing every surface, trying to erase 2 years of habitation. They'd even attempted to recreate Sarah's original decorating scheme, but their version looked like a movie set approximation of warmth. I arrived early, before the official start time, finding Harold in the driveway directing last-minute landscaping touch-ups. He'd lost weight, dark circles shadowing his eyes. The confident businessman who'd sat in my living room was gone, replaced by a man sensing trap walls closing in. "Bart," he said, forcing a smile. "Everything's ready. I think Sarah would be pleased." I looked around at the hasty preparations, the obviously new furniture trying to look old, the freshly planted flowers already wilting in their store containers. "You've done something here, Harry. Really something." Emily arrived next, along with the setup crew for the memorial. As Sarah's closest friend and fellow surgeon, she'd taken charge of organizing the event with characteristic precision. What Harold didn't know was that every member of the crew was either an FBI agent, a forensic accountant, or a documentary filmmaker with hidden cameras. "Mr. Bartholomew," Emily said loudly enough for Harold to hear, "the audio-visual team needs access to set up the tribute video. We'll be using the main living room as the screening area." Harold's face paled. "Tribute video?" "Of course," Emily continued smoothly. "We've gathered footage of Sarah's life, her work, her dreams for this place. I'm sure you won't mind. After all, this is about honoring her memory." By noon, over 100 guests had arrived. Sarah's colleagues from the hospital, grateful families whose children she'd saved, donors to her surgical charity, and, importantly, members of the medical board and city officials. Harold had to play the gracious host to people he'd hoped never to see again, while Nathan and Jessica lurked in the background, visibly uncomfortable in their hastily purchased morning attire. Marcus Stone attended as my emotional support companion, a cover that let him coordinate our team without suspicion. He gave me subtle signals as each piece fell into place. The FBI agents were in position. The cameras were rolling. David Park's documentary crew was capturing every moment under the guise of recording the memorial for the hospital archives. District Attorney Michelle Crawford arrived fashionably late, ostensibly to pay respects to a doctor who'd saved her nephew's life. In reality, she was there to witness what Marcus had promised would be the most thoroughly documented confession in California legal history. Harold gave a speech about family loss and Sarah's legacy that would have moved me if I hadn't watched footage of him murdering her. He spoke of maintaining her vision, preserving her memory, being worthy of her trust. The hypocrisy was breathtaking, but he delivered it with practiced sorrow that fooled anyone who didn't know the truth. Then came the moment we'd all been waiting for. Emily stood to introduce the tribute video, her voice carrying clearly through the room. Before we begin, I want to thank Harold Richards for opening Sarah's home to us today. Sarah believed in truth above all else. She used to say that healing required cutting away disease no matter how deep it went. In that spirit, we've prepared something special. The lights dimmed. The screen illuminated with photos of Sarah's life, childhood, birthdays, medical school graduation, her first day as a surgeon. The audience smiled, some wiping away tears. Harold relaxed slightly, thinking this was just another memorial slideshow. Then, the tone shifted. Sarah's voice filled the room, recorded from her video journals. I've discovered something terrible about someone I trusted. But I believe in justice and truth coming to light. If you're watching this, then I was right to be afraid, but also right to document everything. The screen showed the first security footage, Harold entering the villa 3 weeks after the funeral. Then, Nathan and Jessica moving in. Their mocking conversation about the stupid spinster doctor. The parties thrown in Sarah's memory. Harold's phone calls about deserving the property, about keeping the old man away. The audience's shock was palpable. Gasps, whispers, some people half rising from their seats. Harold stood frozen, his face cycling through expressions of disbelief, rage, and finally trapped animal fear. But we were just beginning. The footage shifted to Harold's late-night garage visit. The enhancement made everything crystal clear. Him sliding under Sarah's car, the brake line manipulation, the careful cleanup. The timestamp glowed accusingly in the corner. No, Harold said, his voice strangling. This is fake. This is... Bart, what have you done? I stood slowly, feeling every eye in the room on me. What have I done? I finished what Sarah started. She knew you'd stolen from our company. She was going to expose you, so you killed her. Then you stole her home, her dreams, everything she'd built. Did you really think you'd get away with it? The screen now showed financial records, $800,000 in embezzlement, traced transaction by transaction. Life insurance policies taken out on Sarah without her knowledge. Forged documents, bribed officials. An empire of corruption built on family trust and sustained by murder. Nathan tried to run. FBI agents materialized from the crowd, blocking his path. Jessica collapsed into a chair, sobbing about not knowing, just following her husband's lead. The security footage of her pocketing Margaret's pearls while mocking Sarah's diary played above her protests. Harold made one last desperate play. Bart, please. We're brothers. Think about what you're doing. This is all a misunderstanding. We can work this out privately. Privately. I pulled out Sarah's journal, her final entry bookmarked. Like you worked things out privately with Sarah. She wrote about you, Harold. She knew what you were capable of, but she faced you anyway, because that's who she was. Brave. Honest. Everything you're not. District Attorney Crawford stepped forward. Harold Richards, Nathan Richards, Jessica Richards, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement fraud, and multiple counts of felony theft. You have the right to remain silent. As the FBI led them away, Harold's lawyer, Vincent, tried to slip out quietly. Agents were waiting for him, too, armed with warrants based on the recorded conversations about fabricating ownership documents. The room erupted in chaos. Journalists who'd attended as mourners became reporters again. Donors demanded explanations. Medical colleagues surrounded me with support and shock. Through it all, David Park's team captured every moment for a documentary that would eventually expose the entire network Sarah had been investigating. Emily took the microphone again, her voice cutting through the noise. "This is not how we plan to honor Sarah's memory. But I think she would approve. She believed in cutting out disease wherever she found it. Today, we've excised a cancer that killed one of the finest doctors and human beings I've ever known." The memorial transformed into something else entirely. Families Sarah had helped came forward with their own stories about Harold's construction company, about being overcharged, about shoddy work covered up with threats. The corruption ran deeper than even Sarah had discovered. As the afternoon wound down, I found myself in Sarah's garden, or what was left of it after Harold's improvements. Only the jasmine by the door remained of her original plantings. Emily found me there, tears streaming down her face. "She knew," Emily said. "Sarah knew this might happen, but she couldn't let it go. Just like with surgery. She'd see something wrong and have to fix it no matter the risk." "She left us everything we needed," I replied. "The cameras, the evidence, even the journal. She performed her last surgery from beyond the grave, cutting out the rot she'd discovered." Marcus joined us as the last police car pulled away. "The FBI says this is just the beginning. Harold's arrest will trigger investigations into dozens of construction projects. City contracts bribed officials. Sarah's research is going to clean up corruption throughout Southern California." I thought about Harold, Nathan, and Jessica being processed into custody. They'd lived in stolen luxury for 2 years, thinking themselves untouchable. Now they'd spend decades in cells, smaller than Sarah's closet. The villa they'd treated as their personal playground would become something far different. As the sun set over the Pacific painting, the sky in shades Sarah had loved, I made a decision. The villa would become exactly what she'd envisioned, a place of healing, of hope, of truth, triumphing over greed. Harold had tried to murder that dream along with my daughter. He'd succeeded in taking her life, but failed to kill her legacy. The jasmine bloomed in the evening air, its scent carrying across the garden Harold had tried to erase. Sarah had planted it to remember Margaret. Now it would help everyone remember both of them. 2 women who faced their battles with grace and courage, whose love outlasted those who thought power meant taking what wasn't theirs. The trap had sprung perfectly, but this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about truth, about honoring a daughter who died rather than let corruption spread. Harold would have years in prison to contemplate the difference. Sarah would have approved of that surgical precision. The trial moved with surprising speed. Harold's lawyer tried every trick, but video evidence of brake-line sabotage proved impossible to refute. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty of murder in the first degree. Life without parole. Nathan and Jessica received 25 years each for conspiracy and fraud. Vincent, the corrupt lawyer, got 15 years and permanent disbarment. The network of bribed officials fell like dominoes, each trying to trade information for lighter sentences. I attended every day of testimony, sitting in the front row, where Harold couldn't avoid seeing me. He aged years and months, his hair going gray, his confident swagger replaced by the shuffling gait of a man who'd lost everything. During his allocution, he wept and blamed everyone but himself, Sarah, for threatening him, me, for not controlling my daughter, the system, for tempting him with easy money. The judge listened stone-faced, before delivering a sentence that ensured Harold would die behind bars. But the real revelations came during the estate proceedings. With Harold's fraudulent claim, exposed Sarah's villa returned to her estate. Going through her papers with proper legal authority, we discovered why she'd been updating her will so urgently before her death. She'd created a comprehensive plan for the property, complete with architectural drawings, budget projections, and operational frameworks. The villa wasn't just meant for fundraising parties. Sarah had envisioned Sarah's house, a respite home for families of children undergoing long-term treatment at nearby hospitals. She'd researched every detail: handicap accessibility play areas for siblings, quiet spaces for parents to grieve or hope. Her updated will, properly executed and witnessed, left everything to establish this vision. She'd even identified the medical professionals who should oversee it, the contractors who could be trusted with renovations, and partnerships with local hospitals for referrals. 3 pages detailed how the gardens should be maintained as therapeutic spaces, with the jasmine plant specifically mentioned as the heart of the healing garden to be protected and propagated. Reading her plans, I understood the full scope of Harold's crime. He hadn't just murdered a person. He'd tried to murder compassion itself, to transform a sanctuary for suffering families into his personal pleasure palace. Every party, Nathan and Jessica had thrown every bottle of wine stored where Sarah planned children's library, represented a perversion of sacred intentions. Emily took charge of implementing Sarah's vision, bringing in architects and designers who specialized in therapeutic environments. The renovation took 8 months, and nearly $1 million funded by donations that poured in after David Park's documentary aired. Justice for Sarah became a rallying cry for healthcare reform advocates nationwide. The transformation was remarkable. The cold gray walls Harold had installed gave way to warm, soothing colors. The wine cellar became a children's library, stocked with books in multiple languages. Each of the 3 bedrooms was designed for families in crisis, comfortable, but not luxurious, homey, but easy to clean, private, but connected to support systems. The garden became the crown jewel. Landscape therapists created spaces for every need: meditation corners for parents, play areas for children, wheelchair-accessible paths lined with sensory plants. At the center, Sarah's original jasmine had been carefully transplanted, now thriving in specially prepared soil. Cuttings from it anchored smaller gardens throughout the property, spreading Margaret's memory and Sarah's hope. I found myself visiting during construction, sometimes helping with simple tasks, often just watching Sarah's dream take physical form. Former patients of hers would stop by, sharing stories, donating time or money. One mother brought her now healthy son alive because of surgery Sarah had performed for free when insurance denied coverage. She saved him. The woman told me her son playing in the unfinished garden. When I had nowhere to stay during his recovery, Dr. Sarah let me sleep in the hospital family room. She said someday she'd have a better place for families like us. I guess she kept that promise after all. 2 years. To the day after the memorial that exposed Harold's crimes, we held the official opening of Sarah's house. The crowd was smaller this time, carefully chosen families who'd benefit from the services, medical professionals who'd volunteer their time, donors who understood this was about more than money. I stood in the garden surrounded by blooming jasmine and spoke about my daughter. Not her death, but her life. Her determination to heal, her refusal to accept preventable suffering, her belief that small acts of kindness could change the world. The house behind me stood as proof that she was right. Sarah knew she was in danger, I told the gathered families. But she also knew that some things matter more than personal safety. This house exists because she documented truth even when it threatened her. Every family who finds respite here benefits from her courage. That's her revenge against those who thought greed was stronger than goodness. They're in cages of their own making. Meanwhile, her love keeps growing, helping families they would have ignored or exploited. Emily announced that in its first year, Sarah's house would shelter over 200 families, saving them thousands in hotel costs, while keeping them close to their hospitalized children. Local restaurants had pledged free meals. Therapists offered pro bono counseling. Even taxi companies provided free rides to and from the hospitals. As the dedication ceremony concluded, I noticed a young couple standing apart, holding a baby with obvious medical challenges. The fear and exhaustion on their faces was all too familiar. I approached them quietly. "First surgery?" I asked gently. The father nodded, unable to speak. The mother clutched their daughter tighter. "Come inside," I offered. "Let me show you where you'll be staying. The doctors here are excellent. And this house? This house was built by someone who understood exactly what you're going through." Leading them through Sarah's front door, past the thriving Jasmine, I felt my daughter's presence stronger than I had since her death. She'd known Harold might kill her, but she'd prepared for even that possibility. Her last gift wasn't just evidence for justice. It was ensuring her vision would outlive anyone who tried to destroy it. That evening, as families settled into their rooms and children's laughter echoed from the garden, I sat on the porch Sarah had planned but never seen built. The jasmine perfumed the air with memories of Margaret and promises of healing. Somewhere in federal prison, Harold counted days that would never end. Here in the house he'd stolen and we'd reclaimed, families counted small victories and found strength in shared struggles. The security cameras were still there, upgraded, and monitoring everything. But now, they protected hope instead of documenting crime. Sarah would have appreciated that transformation. She'd always believed in taking broken things and making them whole, whether bodies or lives or houses built on dreams. A father emerged from inside his son's surgery, successfully completed that afternoon. "Mr. Bartholomew," he said, "I don't know how to thank you." "Thanks, Sarah," I replied, as I always did. She made sure evil men's schemes would bloom into something good. That's the kind of doctor she was, always thinking ahead, always putting children first, always believing love outlasts those who try to kill it. As stars appeared over the Pacific, I thought about justice and revenge, about patience and purpose. Harold had played a short game, grabbing what he could without caring who he hurt. Sarah had played an infinite game, creating systems that would help long after she was gone. In the end, there was no question who'd won. Tomorrow, new families would arrive, scared and desperate, finding unexpected comfort in a house born from tragedy, but built on compassion. Sarah's last surgery had taken 4 years to complete, but the patient justice itself had made a full recovery. The jasmine bloomed on, carrying the scent of 2 remarkable women into a future Harold would never see, reminding everyone that some gifts can't be stolen, only transformed into something larger than their givers ever imagined. Looking back now, I realized Sarah had performed one final miracle. She'd turned her murder into medicine, her killer's greed into grace. Every child who recovered while their family sheltered at Sarah's house was living proof that love is stronger than death, that truth outlasts lies, and that sometimes the best revenge is a life well lived in service to others. Harold took my daughter, but he couldn't take what she stood for. Nathan and Jessica stole her possessions, but they couldn't possess her spirit. They'd all confused having with being, taking with creating. Now they had decades to contemplate that difference, while Sarah's legacy grew stronger every day. I'm 70 years old now, my body showing its age, but my purpose clearer than ever. I spend most days at Sarah's house, helping where I can, sharing stories with families who need to hear them. Sometimes I'm the grandfather figure, sometimes the maintenance man, always the proud father of a daughter who refused to let corruption win. The district attorney told me this case had changed how they investigate suspicious deaths, especially when inheritance is involved. Sarah's security system setup became a template recommended to vulnerable individuals. Her documentation methods were taught at the FBI Academy as examples of building airtight cases. Even in death, she kept teaching, kept healing, kept protecting others. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came last month. A young woman arrived at Sarah's house with her daughter, who needed heart surgery. As I showed them around, she stopped at Sarah's portrait in the entrance hall. "I know her," she said softly. "She operated on my brother years ago, saved his life when everyone else said it was impossible. Is she here? I'd love to thank her." I explained gently what had happened, how Sarah's house came to exist. The woman listened, tears flowing freely. "So this place exists because someone tried to stop her from helping." She looked around in wonder. They failed completely, didn't they? She's still saving lives, maybe even more than before. That's the truth Harold never understood. You can kill a person, but you can't kill what they represent if others carry it forward. Every family that finds shelter here, every child who heals, while their parents find strength in the garden, every moment of grace born from calculated evil, they all testify that Harold's crime was not just a failure, but a catastrophic miscalculation. He'd thought removing Sarah would end her interference. Instead, her death had multiplied her impact 100-fold. The villa he'd coveted now served more families in a month than he'd entertained in 2 years. The money he'd stolen had been recovered and donated to children's charities. The life he'd taken had inspired countless others to live with purpose. If you're watching this somewhere, listening to this story unfold, ask yourself, what would you do if faced with such betrayal? Would you seek violent revenge or patient justice? Would you let grief consume you or transform it into something healing? And most importantly, do you believe that good can grow from evil's garden if tended with love and purpose? Sarah believed it. She planted jasmine expecting beauty, got thorns and poison instead, but somehow ensured flowers would bloom anyway. That's her true legacy. Not just the house, or the gardens, or the families helped, but the proof that principled people can play longer games than criminals ever imagine. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. If Sarah's story touched you, please honor her memory by supporting similar sanctuaries in your own communities. Like this video if you believe justice and compassion can triumph over greed. Subscribe to hear more stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. And share this with someone who needs reminding that light can bloom in darkness's own garden. May you find your own jasmine in whatever soil life gives you. May you plant hope, even when surrounded by those who would uproot it. And may you remember Sarah's truth, that healing outlasts harming that love, outlives those who try to kill it, and that sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to let evil have the last word. From Sarah's house, where broken families find wholeness, and Harold's greed became grace. This is Bartholomew, signing off with gratitude for every one of you who believes good people can win by playing better games, not dirtier ones.